Okay, here we go. We're going to kick this thing off, everyone. We've got, first of all, on behalf of my team at CBRE, both myself, Scott Stuber, Emily Whiting from our workplace team, and my partner, Jacob Bobek, along with James Siegel and his team at OpenPath, we first want to send our best wishes to you, your families, and your workforce, hoping that this situation is impacting you as minimally as possible. And with that, our goal today is to continue to attempt to provide you, our friends, our clients, in kind of a mass delivery format, with tools that we found to be helpful to either kind of minimize that impact from a business environment and really leverage your time in a way that does not compromise productivity and efficacy of you running your business. We talked last week, for those who attended, about shifting to remote workforce ASAP and how to do that from a facility standpoint with OpenPath chiming in, and from a workplace standpoint with CBRE chiming in. And today we're more focused on, okay, now that we've got that in place, how do we keep it from breaking? So we've got content to walk through, a brief amount of content, but then the majority of the time is really going to be focused on catering to your questions. So if you haven't already, please submit those questions to the link below at the bottom of the screen, www.menti.com. And with that, I'm going to ask Jake Bobek to introduce our speakers.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks for those opening words. So I'm just going to make quick introductions for Emily and for James. I also want to remind everybody that Emily and James's emails are in this presentation. Feel free to reach out to them with other questions. Scott and I are available for questions as well. But to introduce Emily, Emily, thanks for joining on this. Emily leads our CBR workplace change management practice in the Midwest. So she's actually based in Chicago. Emily has a background in program management and process design, and Emily thrives on supporting sustainable behavioral change related to workplace moves and modernization. The speed at which the professional world has shifted to remote work reinforces Emily's belief that people are made adaptable, and she's eager to build strategies to ensure long-term success for her clients and companies out there. Emily's national workplace team is comprised of 40 workplace people, change and organizational design experts distributed across the US, and her team has worked primarily remotely for the past 10 years. So any questions on remote working, Emily and her team are very good resources for that. James Siegel, quick introduction for you, James. I'll leave the dentist note off this time for anybody who was here last week. But James is a serial entrepreneur, and James has built and sold 3 successful technology companies over the past 17 years. He's based here in Los Angeles, and his new role is president with OpenPath. James is very well versed in addressing the trials and tribulations of businesses that encounters, especially when it comes to human capital and their technology needs. James is a recipient of the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And James is also an investor advisor to technology startups, VC and private equity funds. And James is actively involved in various community and philanthropic organizations. So we're both very happy to have you both here, and I will turn it over to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake, for the introduction. My name is Emily Whiting, and I'm thrilled to be here today with James to continue the Surviving versus Thriving webinar series regarding remote working. Last week, you and Casey did an excellent job speaking to the tips and tricks to maximize virtual collaboration and technology, such as Zoom and Slack, to best enable communication, engagement, and leadership in a remote work environment. The last week of remote work behind us, and perhaps more for some, it's likely that we've come to master the software. We know how to set up a Zoom call, where to find that elusive mute button, and how to share screens, and even the surprising comfort of hosting a virtual happy hour with our colleagues. But this week we received new questions about addressing behaviors to sustain productivity and connectedness, both in the short term and in the long term. So this webinar is broken up into 3 parts. First, I'll answer some of the most common questions received this week as it relates to stabilizing the abrupt transition to remote working and implementing permanent systems to plan for the future. Then I'll pass it over to Jake, and he'll address more common questions regarding remote work security in the near and far term. These questions were submitted by today's attendees prior to the webinar. If you didn't get a chance to send in a question in advance, don't worry. At the end of the presentation, James and I will be answering additional questions submitted by the audience in real time. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. All participant microphones have been placed on mute to help us control for background noise. Instead of shouting out, we're inviting you to go to menti.com to submit your questions. The URL and access code will be posted at the bottom of each page throughout the presentation. You can access Menti from your laptop or your mobile phone and can submit a question at any time throughout the presentation. All questions are anonymous, and so feel free to submit more than one. Our goal is to answer as many as we can within our 30-minute time frame. Though if we run out of time, please don't be discouraged. We still want to hear from you so that we can tailor future webinars to topics that are most relevant. As a final disclaimer, we want this to be a useful and actionable webinar for everyone. So wherever possible, we will be specific about tech tips and features to inspire immediate solutions. However, companies and technologies mentioned in this webinar will be shared as examples only and don't represent the full suite of products that may exist in these categories. So with that, let's dive into our pre-submitted workplace and remote security questions. First up, I received a lot of questions around how can I be an effective remote manager during these times. It's not surprising because as in any pressure test, the gaps and issues in management can become magnified. And I'd say that the definition for what it means to be a good manager may seem like it's changing today, but in fact it's not. During crisis and in the face of a radical shift to remote working, good management maintains focus on the following: giving clear and concise direction. Many of the goals that you have set may have changed. What you need in this moment may have shifted, so be clear in what you want and in what you need as a manager. And remember to delegate. Managers need the support, and employees will find value in contributing during these times. Next, be sure to display empathy, not just for yourself and your employees, but your colleagues, your clients, and your vendors. Give people the space to react how they need, as everyone handles stress differently, and employees may be facing different challenges beyond the computer screen, such as health and financial concerns, or balancing work and family simultaneously. Manage expectations. With less capacity, especially related to the challenges just mentioned, you get less done. To manage, look to de-scope some of your current initiatives to ensure attainable results in the short term. And last, celebrate and give praise. Celebrate a project deliverable, great feedback from a client, or a teammate's birthday. Share praise publicly on a team call or via your new hashtag Yay channel that was set up on Slack probably since last week's webinar, as that was one of our key tips. Public praise boosts morale and gives reassurance that employees are doing their best, which is incredibly reassuring and motivating in these times. The next question we received was one that I really enjoyed. I now feel like I'm a Zoom power user, but I also feel trapped in back-to-back video calls. How do I break the monotony? I look back and I think, at first the transition to remote work seemed like a novel respite from the rigors of daily office life. Commuting, fewer office-based distractions, and perhaps some extra time with the family at the end of the day. Memes suggested soon that we'll find out which of those meetings could have been emails after all, so it was all in good spirits. And given the omnipresence of remote technology tools across industries, many of us were still able to achieve a similar level of productivity, even remote. But entering week 2 of a fully remote workforce, perhaps we become too attached to video conferencing, and we need to work in some alternatives. My advice for the best way to do that is to limit meetings if you can. In order to maintain productivity, we need to find a balance between results and face time and give people the space to achieve deep focus. We need to be mindful of the trade-offs of meetings as well, and remember that 6 people in a room for an hour isn't a 1-hour meeting, it's a 6-hour meeting. Mix up the channel and the medium. As we settle into remote working, it's important to rely on various, and dare I say more traditional modes of communication. Rather than a video call, suggest a simple phone call without video. This may allow you or your colleague to eat lunch without being on display, or take a walk outside while still working. And change up the rhythm. Look to explore new features and AI bots to your instant messaging tools that you've become accustomed to that may be able to automate Scrum meetings at the top of each day. From there, you can avoid general status calls and really prioritize the specific topics and issues that truly warrant a follow-up that day. And last, be prepared. Collaborating virtually forces us to come prepared, to garner clear outputs, and to do our best to avoid contributing to someone else's conference call bingo board. Remember to test your technology beforehand and to mute when you aren't speaking. If you're the owner of a meeting, set the purpose in advance. If this is a brainstorming meeting, a status update, or a decision-making meeting, then you can get clear about who actually needs to attend. And lastly, as a courtesy, look to set a calendar invite to end 5 minutes early, giving participants a break in between meetings to go stretch or gather some water. Third question we got was a little bit more longer term facing. How can I best prepare my team for a potentially longer duration of working remotely before even going back into an office? It's quite possible that shelter-in-place reality for certain parts of our country will persist. And with uncertainty, we need to show our employees that you care. Employees need to talk, to laugh, and to feel secure. And it's key to note that people's memories are disproportionate in times of peace versus moments of crisis like this. And employees will look back and remember the way they were treated. So we have to ask, how do we want to be remembered? My answer is separated into 2 areas, speaking to equipment and EQ, or emotional intelligence, to lead yourself and your team through extended remote work mandates. Safety first and equipment first. Ensure that your team is safe and that they have the equipment they need. It's difficult to ask anyone to perform otherwise. Check in with your employees to see that they do have access to natural light. They have ergonomic chairs and a suitable workspace. Look into funding accessories such as a wireless mouse and Bluetooth headset that make working a little bit more comfortable. And depending on the role and function, does an employee need an additional monitor for more detailed tasks? On the EQ side, as with any change, personal or professional, and especially in workplace change, we follow a curve. We start out in a bit of shock, and then as reality sets in, we begin to doubt the outcome and find the transition state frustrating or out of our control before we ultimately accept the changes with our new experience. Right now, the workforce may be entering this valley period, and organizations can anticipate this and lift teams up by leaning into culture. Our CBRE national team just launched a brand new culture crew in the last week that was specifically tasked with scheduling regional happy hours, checking in one-on-one with teammates, and reinforcing our values in distributed locations to keep our team united during these times. And last, answer questions with compassion. We in workplace change always tell our clients, in the absence of information, people will make it up, and that rings true here. And that the lack of information will seed doubt and lead to inaction. Even if you say, I don't know now, but I'll get back to you, that's acknowledgement and a great first step. The last question that we received on the workplace end was far more future-facing for those who were able to lift up and look more proactively into how they can be thinking about enabling their organization to support the potential increase in remote working once offices start reopening. Working flexibly or having the option to work remotely has typically been seen as a business perk, but today we're beginning to think about mobility through the lens of business continuity, now that all employees have found remote work to be possible. While employees really do benefit from being face-to-face, the future may be more about how the office changes to accommodate greater flexibility versus an increase in remote working for all. Firstly, I want to touch on remote accessibility tools. Companies can start to look at supporting internal and external mobility by equipping both physical workplace in addition to employees with the technology and tools needed to be successful in virtual collaboration. That includes supplying all employees with laptops and Bluetooth headsets as a baseline. Having mobile accessibility through VPN. And then in the office space, making sure that your meeting rooms are now video-enabled spaces to easily collaborate with those employees that choose to work remotely or in the office that day. Also invest in screen sharing technology for ease of collaboration now that more of our work has moved to the cloud system. Speaking of, companies can begin to put in place infrastructure to ensure a seamless experience. In many cases, paper is the item that really tethers us to our desk, but in this remote working environment, we can look to invest in cloud storage and an infrastructure on the back end to support additional data that must be considered. As you build your business continuity plan, account for regular remote testing as well to make sure that your systems can hold up. Lastly, I want to talk about experience. As I mentioned before, flexibility in most cases have been a perk afforded by role or title. These barriers have now been removed as a result of COVID-19, and so ensuring a quality experience for in-office and remote collaboration requires documenting and institutionalizing remote work policies and investing in training, both technical and managerial, to make sure that our behavioral best practices remain consistent whether we're remote or in the office. And for my final slide, I just want to tie it back to the basics and bring us back to a number of resources that are available to anyone looking to improve their effectiveness on virtual collaboration. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to James to continue the presentation.
That's great. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate that. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, excellent. Somehow I got off presentation mode, so let me just go back there. There we go. And there we go. I'm in control of your computer. So while I'm here, I'm gonna make some purchases on Amazon because I hope you're just logged into Prime right now. So hey there, folks. It's great to be with you today. We at OpenPath have been fielding a lot of questions this last week in regards to really how to manage a whole lot of security issues that have come up. So I'll go through a host of those. Basically what has been breaking since people have moved to a remote workforce, and apparently there's quite a few things. There's still employees that are coming into the office. Now, some of them should and some of them shouldn't. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We've got questions that came in around also things that are going missing at the office. And again, some of those are things that are supposed to be going out the door, like people taking home, workstations or monitors and the like. But some of them are things that are not supposed to be leaving the office. Someone actually stole all the toilet paper from someone's office, which I thought was interesting. That happened in our building as well. And so some mastermind is driving around Los Angeles right now with a truck filled with toilet paper from our office, selling it at discounts. So if you need it, look for the guy. I think there's also a lot of concerns about what do I do with this space to secure it while I'm gone. So how do I lock it down? Different floors of a building, different sections of a building. And then finally, what is the world going to look like when we come back? And will our offices be kind of safe, depending on how long we're out of the office for? So let's dive into that. Let's first start with how do I track if employees are actually still coming to my office? There's a number of features and capabilities that are built into any access control system that your building or your office has that allow you to set alerts. And you can now customize these alerts and thresholds based on different parameters. So you can say, look, if a door is propped open at my office for more than 30 seconds, I want to know about it because someone's probably hauling stuff out. Or if there's been someone who had a credential but that was revoked, who's trying to access it, set an alert or an alarm. You can set these alarms based really on anything that you want in the control panels of your access control systems. If you have a VPN, you VPN into your local on-premise system. If you have a cloud-based system like OpenPath, you'll just log in and change those settings. But that is a way to really sort of determine, okay, how do I know who's coming in and what's going on, and a best practice there. Another question that came up is about how do I lock down different sections of my building or my office. Every door in a building has an access control system that controls it, and it's got, at least if it's an electronic lock, and it has a schedule that's set for that door. What this means is you have to override that schedule. Most schedules during the week are set to be unlocked from 9 to 5 and then locked at different hours. Now, of course, you have to override those schedules. There's different features that are built into access control systems. One of them is a lockdown feature. And you can use that as a way to really secure an entire section, and it overrides all of the schedules. And then you can have different levels of access privileges granted for employees who might need to come in, or facilities personnel or other essential employees who might need to come in. One thing to also note here is that, at least with our system, you can create different plans. So you can create a plan for the next 2 weeks that basically locks a certain section of the building down so that you can have that in control, and that will override all the schedules. And then you can make different folks at your company have control of it, so that from their phone, they can actually just trigger that lockdown, which means they can go in and go out. This is a feature that was used more for active shooter and emergency events, and now it's used to really secure your buildings when you're not there. Another thing that people have asked about is, how do I know what's going on when I'm not there and I actually kind of want to see it? So access control systems often are connected to and integrated with video management systems. So if you have a video system for surveillance at your building or your office, and you have an access control system, you can tie those two together, and you can make sure that now anytime an alarm triggers on your access control alerts, you then can see the video that happened at the exact same time at that door. And depending on how many cameras you have, you can see that sort of facing both ways. What's nice about, by the way, all of these kind of things that I'm mentioning is, if you don't have these in place right now, this is actually a pretty good time to deploy these kind of technologies. They deploy really quickly. There's a lot of people out there in the world, security and alarm and video installers, who have the time. They're deemed essential right now, and so they're allowed to sort of go to your facilities and put these in, and they can connect you up to a cloud-based remote service right away. So just keep in mind, while no one's in the office, this is probably a good time to invest in these kind of systems so that you have control. A lot of discussion around what's the new normal going to look like. Are our offices actually going to be safe to go back to? Obviously, germs being a huge consideration. Here's the challenge, people don't really necessarily want to, be touching door handles, don't want to be having to, distribute and hand out new key cards and keys. There's a lot of back and forth. And if you have to say 6 feet away from people, you don't want to be handing things back and forth. Using different kinds of credentials to get into your office building is important. So if you have an access control system that has a mobile feature, you can enable that right now. There's no better time than ever to download the mobile app and start to use it. This allows you to really control your own credentials. It's your phone, you know who's holding it, you know who's touching it, and you can open doors that way. One of the things that's nice is that some of these systems, like the OpenPath one, allow you to not even have to touch anything with your hand. You can use your elbow, you don't have to swipe a card or anything like that. And if you add electrified doors in, it gets even better. So I wanted to show a quick video here of some of the stuff that people have been sending us this week of what they're doing. This is one of our customers actually sort of set this up, and I'm just gonna hop ahead here real quick to sort of show you how this is working here. They set up an automatic door that triggers with your phone. So basically, you just unlock the door with your phone, you walk up, you don't actually have to touch anything, and you just walk right in. Think about a germ-free environment where nobody wants to actually deal with any kind of common surface. This is incredibly important. One of the best practices that we've put into place ourselves with all of our employees is that if you need to go back to the office as an essential employee, we're making people actually go in with wipes and wipe down door handles, wipe down common areas in the kitchen, wipe down their workspace. When they are done with what they need to do, they wipe it down again and they leave. And that way we're ensuring that there's as little germ contamination as possible between people who are essential and who do need to be in the workplace. And so with that, I will finish what I had to say and hand it back to Emily to take back control. So thanks.
Great, thanks, James. And Emily, thank you for taking over the control. We're going to shift to Q&A. We've been flooded with a few questions, and so we're just going to dive into it. I'm going to start with maybe kind of more of a silly question for James or Emily. On the topic of maintaining employee morale and culture, you spoke last week about doing a weekly happy hour. What are some creative ideas to keep those happy hours fresh so you're not just sitting looking at your colleagues with a cocktail in hand and wondering why you're not with your family?
James, I'd be happy to jump in.
Yeah.
And then pass it over to you. But it's a great question. I think there's a lot of excitement when we experiment with new fun culture activities like this, but at the end of the day, we want to keep it fresh. So some new ways our team has been exploring is maybe it's not happy hour, but we look at having virtual coffees with one another. We keep it fresh by rotating coffee cups and sharing our daily coffee cup on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Another option we've been talking about is we have a Team Connect meeting, which is a team-wide meeting, 40 faces on a Zoom call every other Friday. And we've discussed making those themed events. So do we want to have a Team Connect where it's wear your craziest hat to the Zoom call? So again, just keeping it fun, lighthearted, and showing our personalities are different ways that we're trying to stay in touch and maintain that culture.
Yeah, I think those are a great piece of advice. You know, what we've been exploring is different ways to basically help make fun of your coworkers. So on our last Zoom call, we had one of my colleagues had a really nice picture of him and his fiance, and we all made that the background. So that was nice, and he got really wonderfully embarrassed about that. The other thing that you can do is you can, make sure that you don't take the phone with you when you go to the bathroom. This is embarrassing when you sort of have this, happening. But, people are just doing all kinds of fun stuff. One of my favorite artists, Richard Marx, always likes to, step in and attend some of our meetings as well. So we're always just looking for ways to keep fun. I think Zoom backgrounds is great. Scott's favorite, of course, is, just knowing that we're grateful to all sort of be happy and healthy. So that's definitely one of the things that we're doing, just trying to have fun with Zoom.
Got it. Thank you, James. Really appreciate it. Good suggestions there. I'll try to incorporate those into my practices as well when I have a chance. On to the next question. For folks who need to get things out of their office, what is the best approach to minimize any potential ramifications, really as their manager, to make sure that you protect them, keep them healthy and safe, but then also protect the interests of the business from any future liability issues? Maybe a little bit of a legal question, but any suggestions or thoughts more from kind of a workplace access standpoint or just kind of germ standpoint?
Sure. If you want, I'll go first there because I kind of mentioned this. I actually have an employee today who said that she wants to go back to the office to get her desk setup out. And I'm like, okay, if you go, I want you to wear a mask. And I literally want you to treat it like you were walking into like an Ebola lab where you are completely aware every second that you walk into that building of any surface that you touch and you're washing your hands the whole time. And so, I literally gave step-by-step instructions where you're touching the building, outer doors, you're going into the elevator, you're going everywhere you go. You do not touch your face afterwards. You wash your hands at every step. You bring wipes with you, you use the wipes, and then you throw them away. And then as you sort of move things out. And, if there's other employees in that building who you see, you stay away from them. And so, we have, one essential employee who's coming in on a daily basis to work with, certain deliveries that are coming in and some manufacturing stuff and QA stuff. And so I advised her to go in the back entrance away from that person and really just, have her own path. And even then, I'm more interested in just shipping her new chairs and new monitors, but she doesn't want to wait. So I think you just need to treat it like really, really vigilantly, like literally any surface can give you this, and you just need to be absolutely, thorough in your not touching your hands and washing your hands constantly, not touching your face. That's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I also think it's important to emphasize just going through your standard company protocols as a manager, making sure that you're making a recommendation for your employee that has safety first in mind. So checking in with your legal team, seeing what's possible, and then working with your employee to see what is the base of the need and are there alternatives that we can explore, like you said, maybe shipping equipment rather than exposing them to risk.
Yep.
Great. Okay, we're at 30 minutes, so we're just going to go a couple more here. We have a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. We have a question here on how do managers best help one another during these times as everyone's working virtually? Is there a way to kind of share best practices? Is there a way to make sure you're not duplicating efforts? Any advice or guidance on that? That might be more of an Emily question.
Sure, I'd be happy to take it. I think in times like these, managers probably feel a lot of stress and feel like a lot of the responsibility to respond properly is on them. So more than anything, solidarity is key. I know that we talked last week about having frequent communication. So take a look at the rhythm in which you're meeting with other leaders. Do you have a monthly on the calendar, and is it something you can meet on a more brief basis weekly to talk about what are the rumors that are circulating across our team, and how can we address some of those questions in real time and work to pivot in a more agile way to the priorities of now. And of course, as a leader, you're looking at your long-term roadmap. What are the things, like I said, that we can de-scope or move to the back burner to address the most imminent priorities for our team? So solidarity, looking at your meeting rhythm, and working together to set clear priorities and de-scope where necessary would be my suggestions.
Cool. Yeah, Emily covered it, nailed it.
One more question here, and then actually
Thanks,
two more
James.
questions, and then we're going to wrap. Unless someone submits another.
Scott, it's hard to hear you.
How do you recommend dealing with the family work balance at home, and essentially even kind of embrace the fact that you have the homeschooling going on and integrating that in some way to your approach to work?
Yeah, it's a great question. You cut out a little bit, but I think the question was around how do we approach family and work-life balance, especially given the new constraints. That is a topic that is absolutely personal to me with two young ones at home. And CBRE is coming out with an article on our blog that speaks to some of those tips. And what we've come up with are essentially by crowdsourcing, speaking to other parents in similar situations, and just finding ways to increase solidarity. Find your virtual village. Have a Zoom call with your kids on it to bring a little bit of fun into the conversation. Be really specific about your boundaries. I think working flexibly, we forget that we still need to find those black and white spaces to work and prioritize family accordingly. And have fun. Remember that our kids are our best medicine for stressful times. So every now and again, remember to be silly and have that dance party when you need to relieve some of this stress.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm living it every day. I definitely had to yell downstairs at 10:55, which is like, Daddy's got a webinar. You guys really need to be quiet. Because during the day, I have two actually signs that I hold up as I'm on calls. One sign is this, which is definitely not politically correct. I don't advise that you hand this to your children, but it does make me feel a little better. And the other sign that I'm constantly holding up during calls is this one, which is not making my wife a big fan of me, but frankly, I should have held this sign up most of our marriage anyway when our kids ask for anything. So yeah, that's how I'm dealing with it. But I think Emily's advice is spot on.
Great. The last question is are there any particular changes that I can make now that allow me to adjust to this current triage mode, but at the same time implement long-standing systems and processes that will help me in my business down the road?
Oh gosh.
It's a great question. And, you know, it was fun to see the questions come in. I think people are in this in-between state of dealing with the here and now, but beginning to realize that this might be a more permanent arrangement to work from home. So I think bringing a moment of mindfulness to the situation and finding ways to accept the new reality and understand at the end of each week, should I do a little bit of journaling? What worked for me this week? What do I need to plan ahead for next week with my routine, the way I communicate, or my knowledge with technical tools to be more successful in collaborating remotely. So for me, it would be just bringing mindfulness to the moment and what lies ahead.
Yeah, I think that as a business owner and as someone who's very involved in the commercial real estate world, I think one of the themes that has been discussed amongst my investors, my business partners, my peers, colleagues, and my customers is this whole idea of, we have an office footprint today. All of us do, and we need to kind of start to think about, what that office footprint needs to be optimized for, and how ready our facilities and our access is for the new normal. And I think actually, guys, one of the topics that we want to talk about in our next webinar is really how do we start to think about what our office footprint needs to look like as we prepare to go back to work. There's a unique opportunity right now while we're out of the office to organize and optimize that space, to put processes, schedules, work practices in place where we're going to have a heavier remote workforce. And we're going to use less of the office space that we were using, and we're going to use that space differently. The buildings that we go back to need to be ready for a more germ-free environment where people are not touching surfaces, and there's a level of attention to how the common space, people move through it. I mean, think about if we're supposed to be 6 feet away from each other, how many people can really stand together in an elevator? So there's a lot of thought that really needs to go into the preparedness to make the workspace ready for the new normal, whether that's in 2 weeks, 2 months, or 6 months. And I think that's a lot of attention that we need to help folks with. We're getting a lot of questions about that. Scott, I'm sure you and Emily are getting a lot of questions about that. And so I think that should probably be what we talk about on our next get together.
Great. I think with that, then, Jake, if you want to wrap things up here and encourage everyone to join us next week for probably the topic on just that, since that's where a lot of our questions are going to right now.
Yeah, we're going to keep this going. And as you can imagine, this is just everything's just changing by the day. And we hope you found the content today helpful. Everyone's email and contact information is here on this page. We'll also be circulating a video recording of this so you can look back and catch anything that you may have missed. But feel free to reach out to James or anyone on the CBRE team to answer any other questions you may have. We thank you all for joining. Hope everyone's safe and healthy out there. And we're going to do another one of these next week, as James mentioned. So we hope you can join.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.